Good morning, sports fans. Welcome to a very special edition of Sports World Weekly, coming to you live from Cranston West High School Stadium in Cranston, Rhode Island. Of course, we're going to have a very special show for you today as we go through our final Saturday on the road around the state of Rhode Island. Nick LeBlanc, host of Titletown Throwdown, will actually join us live here on the show. We will not be in boxes on our screen. We will actually be right next to each other, socially distanced, but appropriate enough, as we do this very special edition of Sports World Weekly. We're going to cover F1 racing, a very crazy qualifying situation in Turkey in advance of the Istanbul Grand Prix tomorrow. We'll talk about the issues abound with COVID testing and positive cases in the Premier League that will be under effect because of what happened during UEFA Champions League and Nationals qualifying. We're also going to talk college football, the college basketball season, which should be getting underway in a few weeks, and the NFL, and we'll close everything off with a look at the NBA draft and the rest of the sports around the New England region. You're watching Sports World Weekly on the Sports Fan Base Network, Rhode Island. Good morning. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly, coming to you live today from Cranston High School West Football Stadium in Cranston, Rhode Island, a brand new complex that was just built very recently. As you can see, the beautiful shot behind us, a little kind of glared out by the sun, brand new turf field, and we are inside of the brand new press box that was just built. And we'll actually be on air today calling the Cranston West versus Cranston East rivalry game in boys soccer. That game is going to take place at 2:30. You can catch all the action right here on sfbnri.com. But we start, as we do every Saturday that has a race weekend in it, overseas in the Formula One series, and they are in Istanbul, Turkey for the Intercity Grand Prix. And qualifying had bits of problems today. If you watched it early this morning, they went through free practice 3 about 4 a.m. Eastern time, perfectly fine, no problems. Weather looked good. Got through most of Q1 perfectly fine. Weather looked good. Halfway into Q2, around about the 6-minute mark remaining in Q2, the heavens opened and started dumping buckets of rain all over the track. Now, what happens when you have a green racetrack like that, where you don't have as much marbling down because of not having practice sessions in their entirety as they normally do? It was a quick practice session this weekend. You don't have a lot of rubber on the track, not a lot of grip capability. So when the rain came pouring down, you get all of that rubber washing off of the track. Now you get what's called a green racetrack, and you get cars that slide. And so what we saw happen was eventually the FIA, with about 6 minutes left in Q2, having to call a red flag on the race after multiple cars, including Max Verstappen, Valtteri Bottas, and Lewis Hamilton, all slid off. Luckily, none of them got into the beaching, but they all slid off the track. Finally, the FIA decided to red flag the race. That was held up for about 15 to 20 minutes before they put the Air Titans onto the track, trying to jet dry and get all that standing water off the track. They were able to get enough off, plus give the teams time to be able to change into their race tires. What ended up happening was, going into the Rain-X rain tires, it didn't work either. There was way too much water for even the rain tires to channel. And so the cars were still going off, and we saw George Russell actually go into the beaching, and we actually saw Kimi Räikkönen completely slide off and actually lifted up over the turtle curbing at one point. Now, if Räikkönen goes sliding off, you know there's a problem, because he is the most experienced driver, the most veteran driver in Formula One. And if Räikkönen couldn't hold the track, you knew that the track was dead. They red flagged it again. Q2 saw a number of people who should not have been bumped out, and also saw Esteban Ocon sitting at P1 provisionally, and he had an over 2-minute lap time. things finally sorted themselves out as they got into Q3. And while the shock of the day isn't that we got through Q3 finally, the shock of the day is for the first time in the 2020 season, Mercedes-Benz will not have a car on the first row. They will not have a car locked out in the 1 or 2 position either. Mercedes-Benz got locked out for the first time in over a decade as Racing Point put both Lance Stroll and Sergio Perez on the front row. In fact, Lance Stroll in P1, first time in his Formula One career that Stroll lands on P1, and he becomes the first Canadian driver since the famous Jacques Villeneuve, who has a racetrack named after him in Canada, to be on the pole in Formula One. The race tips off tomorrow, the Istanbul Grand Prix. There are only about 5 races left to go in the 2020 season. Lewis Hamilton doesn't even have to win the race tomorrow. Now, if he did, it would be his 94th victory in his career, which would continue to increase his world championship record that he broke earlier this year. But he does not even have to win the race. He needs to finish somewhere in the top 5. If Hamilton is able to finish somewhere in the top 5 in tomorrow's race, he will clinch his 7th FIA Formula One World Championship, and that will be a record breaker as well. So Hamilton, a chance to set yet another record in what has been an insane season that should be already completed. We should have started this season back in March. Instead, we started the season in July. So everything is off the wall. 17 races this year instead of the normal 23. However, the FIA has now announced they will run a 23 race schedule next season, starting in March as normal. And they will be returning to Mexico, Brazil, Canada, and the US, all countries that were left off of the schedule this year due to their COVID-19 protocols. So that's where we stand. Lights out tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern. Yes, a very early race, as is sometimes with the mid-European races, as we trek our way towards Abu Dhabi and the end of the Formula One season. Quickly now to Premier League action. No games due to the international break. All teams playing either in FIFA competitions and or for UEFA Nations League competition. But the Premier League will have a problem when they come back, especially in that of table-leading Liverpool and the defending champions. Their forward, Mohamed Salah, has tested positive for COVID-19. He has picked it up. At least he is certain that he has picked it up somewhere while he was on national team duty. He is now quarantining back in Liverpool. He says that he is not experiencing any symptoms at the moment. Liverpool medical staff will monitor the situation and will continue to test him and see if he can get 2 negative tests before Liverpool's next match. The Premier League will clear him to play and he will be able to continue on. If not, they may be without their leading scorer as they go into a very hard stretch of games coming up. Here's the breakdown of what we're going to do for today on Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island and the Sports World Weekly Show. As I mentioned, we've got a special guest. Nick LeBlanc is actually in the house with us today as we are broadcasting live from the Cranston West Football Stadium. So we're going to do things a little bit differently than we normally do. And we're going to talk some college football. We're going to talk college basketball. We're going to talk the NFL and Boston sports because he knows more about that than anybody on this network. That's why he's the host of Titletown Throwdown. So we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. You're watching Sports World Weekly on the Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly on the Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island. Matt Jolis actually in A broadcast booth with Nick LeBlanc. This is a crazy thing. We have been on computer screens so many times during the past 8 months because of everything going on with the pandemic, but because of us also both being in the same state for once and not me being on the road, we have had a chance to actually be in a box. And first thing that I wanted to talk about today is something that is sort of an ironic thing to say. If you go back to March, when you and I both started at this network, one of the very first articles that you and I covered, and one of the very first shows, in fact, that we ever did together was when the Ivy League shut down the basketball season as we were going into kind of the first breakdown of the COVID-19 pandemic back in March, when it was affecting, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks, and we thought it was just going to affect the March Madness tournament. Here we are now, all the way 8, almost 9 months later. We are now into November. We are talking about the start of the college basketball season. And last night, I grabbed my phone and send a message saying, this isn't a rerun. The Ivy League has canceled the men's and women's basketball season once again.
Oh, boy. I mean, obviously the situation that's still at hand, COVID-19 cases going up nationwide. So it makes sense. We also have to feel bad for the athletes. So, they got the tournaments taken away from them, and they're looking forward to the new season. And now cases on the rise once again. Now the whole season is wiped out. You had to feel for the athletes, but at the same time, the health and safety of the athletes is the most important thing.
Now, the NCAA is going to have an interesting situation in this because as far as we know right now, it's only the Ivy League that has canceled men's and women's basketball for the season. There may be an issue developing in ice hockey because the ECAC is separate, but 6 of the 12 teams in the ECAC are Ivy League schools. Ivy League did not just shut down basketball, they called a halt to all winter sports. So this affects not only the men's and women's basketball season, this is going to affect their indoor track and field teams. This affects their gymnastics teams. This affects their ice hockey teams. A multitude of others. So this is going to affect the ECAC, which is one of the preeminent hockey leagues in college hockey, but not any of the other leagues, especially the Power 5 or 6 conferences, have said anything yet about what they're doing, simply other than we're going to start in January and play conference only schedules, a la what we've seen in college football right now. If we look forward, just seeing what we've kind of seen the last month, do those Power 5 conferences hold on to what they're doing? Or looking at the data, looking at the case rates that have been going, are we going to see January coming in the Power 5 conferences saying we're not playing either?
I think it could go either way. I mean, college football, they haven't had really – they've had some small issues, nothing too major. I think college football's really done a great job trying to power through the season. So with these Power 5 conferences, I think they could do the same. They just keep look, you're telling college kids, you can't do this, can't do that. It's next to impossible. They're going to look at you like, no, I want to go out and do this and that. You're going to tell them, though, do you want to play? And for some of these guys, improve their draft stock in not only the NBA and NFL or any other league they're playing in, either have a chance to improve your draft stock, or you miss a year completely and you're going to be behind everyone else who's already in the professional level. So it's kind of a fair trade-off, but so far college football, they've done a very good job with it. I'd have to say the NFL's gone better with it. So I think if the Power 5 conferences in football are pushing through, I think the Power 5 conferences in the basketball world will power through.
Yeah, some interesting things that you brought up, though, in being that college football has done a pretty decent job so far. Obviously, a few issues here and there. They do have issues this weekend. The SEC more predominantly having issues along with the Pac-12. We'll get into that later on in our next segment. But ultimately, the one thing for me is the NCAA last year granted a 5th year of eligibility to the graduating seniors that were not red shirts who had that 5th year of eligibility for a medical reason or they had been red shirted or whatever. Now, what are you going to do to all those 5th years who this was supposed to be their extra year? And if you are a Penn, Princeton, Brown, Dartmouth, Yale, Cornell, Harvard, you don't want to sit. I mean, as much as I have all reverence for those universities, you don't want to sit there for another year because you're putting yourself, unless you're Jeremy Lin, you're putting yourself, you're putting yourself back from where you need to go in your professional career.
And that's a decision that the students are not to negotiate with the college, but also just really take a step back, saying, okay, I decided to do this year. Now, this year's wiped out. One of my options, I can go back for a quote-unquote sixth year to play that final year for draft stock, or do I take the risk, go in the draft, risk not getting drafted at all, and sign as an undrafted free agent? It's a lot of different variables, and you feel for these athletes, but it's a decision that they have to make. Do you want to waste another year? Or do you really want to get to where you want to be right now and really put your body at more risk? I mean, either way, there's risk in there health-wise. Take the pandemic out of it for a minute. Just health-wise, playing the game. If you go back for that sixth year, there's a chance that you can injure yourself long-term and your professional career is already shot down, or you go into the pros and the exact same thing happens. It's kind of one of those lose-lose situations, but same time, though, it's a decision these athletes unfortunately have to make.
Right. And I think also, especially because most of these schools have been down in terms of what their operations have been. They've only been allowing players and the teams that are active in season into the facilities. So right now it's the football teams, it's the soccer teams that are playing if you're in the Power 5 conferences, and everybody else is sort of out of it. So for a lot of these basketball players who last season got shut down, their summer and off-season activities were eliminated from them. Their fall activities have been eliminated from them. You're now expecting them to somehow go into a season in January, if that, with having ultimately been sitting around for almost a year. If you think about it, most of these players on either the men's or women's side have not played since their conference tournaments ended, if that. And that was back last February, and we're talking about them starting a month away from what was 1 year ago.
Even if the college basketball season, if and when it does, hopefully it does, there's going to be a lot of ugly basketball. And, it's just the card that we're dealt with. Now, look, come 2022, when all these programs get back to normal and hopefully as a society we're back to normal more so, then it'll be a little bit better. But I think, do you want to not have a basketball season, or do you want to have a season and improve some stats, but there are going to be a lot of ugly games? As a sports fan, I'll take the ugly games.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting situation. We're going to see how it all breaks down. College hockey season did get underway last night, at least in the Big Ten Conference. Notre Dame and Wisconsin, first two teams to take to the ice and played in a game that should have been a little bit closer than it was. Notre Dame clearly has shown that the draft, the number of players who have come out of South Bend into the NHL draft, has decimated Jim Jackson's team. We're going to have to see if the Fighting Irish can turn around the season and get back to the Frozen Four and a chance at the national championship one more time. But they lost 2-0 to the Wisconsin Badgers last night. So they are not off to a good start to the season and not off to a good start to the Big Ten season either. We'll see how that goes. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on Sports World Weekly, and we're going to discuss college football. The SEC has added another week into the season. What is going on down in the Sun Belt? That is a promo reel for Titletown Throwdown Thursdays at 7 p.m. on the Sports Fan Base Network with Nick LeBlanc and the aforementioned. That's Nick LeBlanc right there. We're actually in the same room today. This is a miracle all of a sudden. But
there's hope for 2020.
there is hope in what has been a wild 2020. Of course, if you've been watching Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island all week, we've been bringing you RIIL action in both boys and girls soccer, all of the games that have had major playoff implications. We were at Connolly Stadium earlier this week for the Central and LaSalle game. Last night at Dietz Memorial Stadium for the Pilgrim and Mount Hope game. And then today here at Cranston West Stadium for the Cranston West versus Cranston East rivalry game. All of these games having implications in the last weekend of the season here for the RIIL playoffs. Of course, this is a unique situation in Rhode Island this year, as soccer is ultimately the only sport playing right now here in the fall. Field hockey is playing a shortened and abrupt season. Football, though, however, is not playing. They will be either in a hybrid model and or play in the spring. A lot of things still to be worked out on the details with that. With that being said, those of us here at Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island also started a campaign to be able to help assist the schools and players during this trying time. It's hashtag Let Them Play RI campaign, a Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island movement. We have also created a lot of great merchandise around that, t-shirts and sweatshirts. You can find all the information about the campaign and also all of the merchandise. Just go to sfbnri.com. College football, 17% of the games in the college football schedule this weekend will not get played. Both Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Cal, UCLA, Wisconsin. I can keep going on down the line. No one in the top 10 who was scheduled to have a ranked game is playing against each other. The first time in almost a decade that there will be no ranked teams playing against each other. There are 4 teams who are in the top 10 that are playing against unranked opponents, but there are no top 10 ranked versus ranked games. But the SEC has now added another week onto the season after a litany of cancellations involving Alabama, LSU, Mizzou, and others have forced them to push the season yet another week to be able to get all the games in. Nick, the College Football Playoff Committee has said they will not move the college football playoffs and the national championship game. Are we going to run into a situation where we're literally going to have the conference championship games, the college football semifinals the next week, and the national championship game the following week, and you're going to see these players have to go 3 in a row?
Most likely, and that's probably the only way that, for college football, that they're really going to get this season done. I mean, in a normal year, you have, all these bowl games, all this hype leading up to the national championship game, to the college football playoffs. This year's unlike any other year, and no, it's not beneficial to the players, not beneficial to the coaches, but it's something that's going to have to be done, because if you're in college football, you want to get the season in as much as you can, and adding on the extra week is not necessarily a bad thing either. But it's unfair to the players. You're still used to having all this time to prepare for a game and whatnot and so forth. You're not going to get that luxury this year, but I think it's not a bad option either, because a lot of these guys who are either juniors or seniors or sophomore, if you win the Heisman, it's a good little test for you to, before you make the jump to the NFL, because you go week after week after week, then playoffs, week off, and then you got the Super Bowl. So it'll be a good little, saying, hey, here's what you're going to expect at the professional level. Even though you were used to this here, it's a good little, wake-up call saying, hey, this is what you're going to be dealing with at the professional level. Might as well give you a little bit of a taste of it. Again, it's probably not the best option. There's probably a couple other options that could go, but I think this is probably the best option for the SEC and really the NCAA as a whole to get the season in, crown a champion, and then just try to and pray they have a normal season in 2021.
Wisconsin has had 2 games canceled. Purdue has had 2 games canceled. Ohio State has had 2 games canceled. Penn State has had 2 games canceled. The Big Ten was one of the last conferences to say that they were coming back. They sat and waited to see what everybody else did, and they come back. Now you're looking at a situation where Ohio State could go undefeated, but because of the number of games canceled, only have 5 wins, which technically by normal rules would not make them bowl eligible or even playoff eligible. Does a 5-0 Ohio State team get into the college football playoffs over, say, a 9-0 or a 9-1 BYU or a 9-0 or say 9-1, team from the Mountain West, like a Boise State even?
That's really tough. I mean, Ohio State, huge college, national recognition. They're always right there in the hunt, whether it's for the Big Ten title and a national championship title. So, ratings wise, for TV wise, and ad placements, it's good to have Ohio State in there because they're going to get the watches. But it's also unfair to a team like BYU, who played their butt off. They didn't have any games canceled. They played 10 straight weeks to get to this point, and then only to be told saying, no, we're going to shut you out because we want the ratings for this other school. That's not really fair to BYU or really any of these other undefeated type teams. So I think it's really got to look at, just look at Ohio State saying, listen, yeah, you won your conference. Congratulations. You had an undefeated season, but the amount of games that were postponed, we cannot have you in the college football playoffs for X, Y, and Z. And if you're Ohio State, you have to understand that, yeah, again, a little, unfair. You won your conference. You deserve to have a bowl game. You deserve to be in the college football playoffs. Understandable, but also, too, you're really going to take a playoff spot away from a 9-0, possibly 10-0 team just to appease the NCAA or one fan base at one school. You're going to get a lot of backlash for that. And I think that's the last thing the NCAA really needs. And not only for 2020, but for the reputation, just, they don't need any backlash. Put the teams in that deserve to be in there and who had the least amount of games canceled.
Big game here in the New England region over in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. Boston College, Notre Dame coming off of that thrilling overtime victory against Clemson, defeating the number 1 team in the nation. If you watched my episode of And That's the Game on the Monday following that game, you already know my thoughts on what happened to Notre Dame in the rankings. But we'll talk about it from this respect. Notre Dame, the last time that they had a game against a number 1 team at Notre Dame Stadium was the game of the century against Florida State, which Notre Dame won. They came into Boston College the following week and promptly got beat by the Eagles. Boston College, and especially quarterback Phil Jurkovec, have been on a good run lately. Do the Eagles have a chance to upset the Irish again today?
How many points did Brady and the Bucks score last week? I just
Yeah.
No, I think there's a legitimate chance. BC's playing great football, but it's also Notre Dame, big conference type team. They just took down Clemson. I'm pretty sure they're the new number 1. Or
Alabama got put number 2, got put number 1 over Notre Dame. Notre Dame is number 2, and that was the point of my show on Monday. Was like, how in the world do you do that?
How I don't know how the heck that happens, but no. I mean, I'll give BC a chance. I'm not gonna, I don't think the game's going to be close, but I'll give BC a chance. I think they'll stay with Notre Dame for a little while, maybe about the first half. Then second half, you probably start to see Notre Dame absolutely run away with it. But, BC, they played really well. This is probably the best BC's looked in about 5, 6, 7 years. So I'll give BC a fighting chance, but the Fighting Irish will knock them out cold.
Yeah, remember BC played Clemson in Clemson when they were number 1 a couple of weeks ago. BC actually led the Tigers by 18 at the half before Clemson rolled off 28 unanswered points to take over the game and then eventually going on to win by 6. We're about halfway through this Sports World Weekly show, a very special edition from the Cranston West Football Stadium in Cranston, Rhode Island. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching Sports Fanbase Network Rhode Island. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly, a very special edition coming to you from the Cranston West Football Stadium in Cranston, Rhode Island, with Nick LeBlanc, host of Titletown Throwdown. Nick, you made a jab during the last segment about Brady and the Bucks, so I'm going to jab you right back for this one. The Bucks do not look like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the first 5 games of the season. Is there a problem with Tom Brady? Is there a problem with Bruce Arians? Or will Antonio Brown fix the Buccaneers?
I still did that experiment one more week anyway. But I think it's just different styles. Bruce Arians is a guy who likes to air it out. Brady's more of a check down type of guy. And look, Brady's been used to one system for 20 years. And it's really hard to get out of one system that you've been with for 20 years and going into a new situation with a new coach like Bruce Arians. So it's still probably a little work in progress relationship. There's obviously going to be, learning curves. Arians is learning every week what Brady can and can't do. Brady's learning every week about what Arians wants him to do and doesn't want him to do. So, look, they're 6-3. It'll be a completely different story if the Buccaneers had the Patriots record, which is 3-5 or 3-6. Tampa Bay's in a good spot right now. I think it's just a nice little growing pain and it's obvious. New quarterback in a new system. A 43-year-old quarterback with a brand new team for the first time in his entire career. So there's obviously going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some disagreements between the head coach, who's an offensive-minded coach, and the quarterback who's not used to really slinging it. He absolutely still can at age 43. It's amazing. But, there's obviously those little growing pains there. So I think Brady and the Bucs will be fine. But they're not behind the 8 ball of the Saints because the Saints beat them twice. They hold the tiebreaker.
Yeah, Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls with the San Francisco 49ers. Steve Young comes in, takes over the team. Montana leaves, goes to the Chiefs for 2 seasons, and then flops his way out of the NFL. Now, Montana is still considered one of the great quarterbacks in the history of the game, and a lot of people don't even talk about those 2 lackluster seasons that we had with the Kansas City Chiefs. They just talk about the San Francisco 49ers and all the years that he was there and the 4 Super Bowls that they won. Is there a potential that Brady, who grew up in California idolizing Montana, who always said that he wanted his career to be like Joe Montana, who played 16 years with the 49ers, and Brady plays 20 with the Patriots, wins 6 Super Bowls, goes to 9 overall. Now Brady goes to the Buccaneers. He's having a 6-3 season, which is better than Montana was having when he was with the Chiefs. But yet they've lost 2 games to the Saints. They're behind the 8 ball now in the NFC South. Brady in the past few games has not looked like Tom Brady. He has not looked like the way the offense has been, it normally can go. And he has some good weapons down there with Gronkowski. He has Mike Evans. He's now gotten Antonio Brown in for whatever that very well might be. Does Brady get one more year before Tampa Bay pulls the plug? Or is that Tom Brady's franchise now?
It's Brady's franchise. Look, the Buccaneers haven't really been relevant since they won the Super Bowl back in 2002 when John Gruden was the head coach. That's the last time the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were really a really formidable foe in the NFL for the last about 18, half a dozen years. They've been an irrelevant franchise since they had – it's not their fault. They had a quarterback who was good in college. He didn't put up look, I'm not trying to knock down Jameis Winston. Winston put up pretty decent numbers to Tampa Bay, 30 touchdowns, and I'd see that. Problem is Jameis Winston had a hard time turning the ball over. Brady's a little bit better with the ball security. But as I said, Brady hasn't looked right in the last couple of weeks, whether that's probably an injury that he's obviously playing through, which is no surprise to anyone. Or, just these teams are putting together better game plans for Brady, which has happened many times in the past. Brady's had has had a lot of duds. He's had a lot of bad games in which he's still won. So it's Brady's franchise. Whatever Brady does, the Buccaneers are going to go. Brady can take them to the promised land, but here's the thing though, Brady still has to perform well. They still have to get stops on defense. End of the day, it's still a team game. A lot of people can look at the stats and say, Brady has this type of win-loss record. But let's look at Super Bowl 52, for example, against the Eagles. Brady didn't turn the ball over at all, except for the fumble late in the game. But I blame the left tackle and Marcus Cannon on that one. They didn't block at all. So Brady, though, 4 touchdowns. Those for over 500 yards, completely balls out. The defense was nowhere to be found. And so, they look.
And the Patriots relied on their secondary for so many years, and it wasn't there.
Exactly. So the Patriots relied on their defense heavily to get them to the Super Bowl. Then magically, the Super Bowl, they just completely disappeared. They were nowhere to be found. They're MIA throughout the whole 60 minutes. Then Philadelphia's defense was nowhere to be found either, except for that one play. But, for me, I don't really look at the win-loss stats for a quarterback. And, again, however well Brady plays is how well the Bucs are going to play. So if Brady's balling out, chances are the Buccaneers are going to win the game, depending on how well the defense is playing. If Brady is struggling, that's where the defense has to pick up the slack, but that's where the offense is going to be throughout the entire game until Brady snaps out of it. Now, it's nothing new. Brady's has had many of these type of games in New England before, and the Patriots ended up winning them because the defense was able to cover up a lot of the flaws that Brady and the offense had. That's not so much the case really in Tampa, where the defense also has a lot of flaws. The offense is flawed. The offensive line completely is flawed. So really, we're really starting to see all the weaknesses that Brady has in his game, which is not a surprise to me. I knew this was going to happen the second he signed down there. But for the type of season that Brady's had so far in his age 43 season, I think he's on pace to be better than Montana.
We're going to go reverse of our Tom Gronkowski show. They go Beantown to the Bay because Tom and Rob went from Beantown to the Bay. We're going to go from the Bay up to Beantown right now. I'm done with Cam Newton. I know that's a weird thing to say 8 games into the season, but was Cam Newton not the answer?
For about weeks 5 through 8, not really, no. But Cam Newton hasn't played. I wouldn't say Cam Newton's played well, but he hasn't played horrendous either. He's been about a mediocre type of quarterback. 2 passing touchdowns, 7 picks, not a good ratio, but his rushing touchdowns is what's helping him kind of stay afloat in the turnover department. Now, it's still a work in progress for Cam, still a work in progress for Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. So, and look, Cam Newton played really well in week 1. He played exceptionally well in week 2 against Seattle. Game that I still feel the Patriots should have won, should have chosen a better play call, McDaniels. And then week 8 against the Buffalo Bills. He didn't play bad. He kept the ball. He kept the offense on the field, except for the last play of the game. But last week Cam Newton showed a lot. He was better with the football. His throws concern me, his footing, but he can work on that himself. But his throws are much more accurate. He was hitting his targets. He was making better decisions. So I'm not ready to pull the plug on the Cam Newton experience yet. It hasn't been pretty, but the Patriots could be in a much worse situation quarterback-wise, because we saw how Brian Hoyer played against the Kansas City Chiefs. That was just a disaster.
Yeah. I'm wondering really, and I've been meaning to ask you this, and I was hoping that you were going to touch on it in one of your Titletown Throwdown shows. Is the Patriots season and where they're at right now, having only 3 wins on the season in week 9, 10 of the regular season, more a product of the players who opted out waited until the last possible second to opt out, which affected how they drafted in free agency affected their salary cap situation because many of them were already installed in their roster positions and roster bonuses and et cetera for the year. Plus also injuries to key players that have occurred because of the lack of OTAs and training camp, not having those exhibition preseason games that we normally have. The Patriots, I feel like, are that team that are a product of repetition and system. The system was broken and they didn't have the repetition. Is that really what's showing here? Not that Tom Brady is God and Bill Belichick can't do anything without Tom Brady and he's about as good as he was with the Cleveland Browns and we need to just get rid of everybody.
I wouldn't say it's really on the draft because Bill Belichick hasn't really drafted well in about the last.
No, his dog years. Drafted this year. I mean, come on. It's like Otto setting a fantasy football draft.
No, I mean, Belichick hasn't really drafted well in the last 5 years anyway, so I take the draft completely out of it. Bill hasn't drafted a Pro Bowl player since 2013. So that should tell you a lot right there. Belichick is not drafting well at all. But, I think, the repetition, not having the OTAs, not having the mini camp, not having the exhibition games. The Patriots could easily be maybe a 5-3, 4-4 team easily under Cam Newton. Newton has much better stats going in there. So, that takes a lot of factor in. And two guys like Dante Hightower, like Patrick Chung opting out. But, but that's besides the point. But either way, though, you got to have that next man up mentality and just try to power through it. And, the Patriots have had a lot of injuries, but they're not alone. All 31 other NFL teams have had the same amount of injuries. The lack of preseason has really hurt the NFL in total, but the fact that we've gone to 10 weeks of the NFL season, I think is a miracle in itself right now. But no, I think it's just, as I said, the lack of repetition, the lack of off-season training that they had time in the building, the lack of time that Cam Newton had in the offseason to go over stuff with Josh McDaniels. Just remember, Newton was signed extremely late in the offseason. The Newton deal didn't get signed until about mid-July. And then 3 weeks later, training camp starts up to get ready for the regular season. So that had a lot to do with this. So I think Newton would have been behind anyway, but having those 4 exhibition games would have been more beneficial to Newton to get him more prepared for the system rather than just being thrown right into the fire as he was. But one thing you don't like about Cam Newton, though, he's not surgery for all the issues that are going on offensively. That's what you want to hear from your starting quarterback. So I'm not ready to pull the plug on Cam Newton just yet. Am I ready to pull the plug on the Patriots season? I was teetering on there last week. If they lost to the Jets, I would have said put the nail in the coffin.
Oh, the Jets! Yeah, if you lost to an 0-for team, yes, put the nail in the coffin right away.
But if you lose to the Ravens this week, A won't be a surprise, but B, then you really have to win out just to try to have a sniff at the playoffs.
Right.
But if you still win against Baltimore this Sunday, which is capable, doubtful to me, but capable, you just gave yourself a lot of momentum heading into the rest of the year.
Right. Colts beat the Titans 34-17. That was the Thursday night game. Texans-Browns.
I did my damn hits on this. This is probably going to be a sneaky good game. No, Deshaun Watson, the Texans are playing pretty decent football since Bill O'Brien got fired. But I'm going to go the Brownies.
The Washington football team and the Detroit Lions.
Lions have lost 7 straight home games, which is absolutely sad. I want to lean Detroit, really do, but I'm going to go to the football team.
Is Matt Patricia out of Detroit at the end of the season?
He should be.
The Bucks and the former Cam Newton Panthers, now with Teddy Bridgewater.
I think this is going to probably be a good bounce back game for the Buccaneers. The Panthers, they started off pretty good. They faded a little bit the last few weeks, and they're going to be without Christian McCaffrey again after he came back, tried to test it last week. Wasn't really a major factor in the game. So this might be an opportunity for the Bucs to get back on the winning side. So I'm going to give it to Tampa.
The still dumpster fire division of the NFC East, Eagles, Giants.
I would say tie, but we only have one tie in that division. But I don't know the Eagles. They get to the respectable 500 mark.
Game that I think is probably the more interesting one on the schedule because I think you can really coin flip and go either way on this game, Jaguars-Packers.
I don't know the Packers. I like the Packers at home. Aaron Rodgers, he's been balling out all season long.
Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills have to go up against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals have been hot as of late. Does Buffalo find a way to get past?
I think they do, but their defense has to play a lot better. I like Buffalo, like the way they're playing, but I'm going to go Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals.
A game featuring two teams that have clearly gone the wrong direction since the start of the season, Chargers and Dolphins.
I don't know the Dolphins. I like the way Justin Herbert is playing. I really like the way that he's really led that offense. Problem is, Chargers can't hold a lead. The AFC version of the Atlanta Falcons can't hold a lead late in the game. So I had to go the Dolphins in this one.
Ryan Fitzpatrick cut his beard and came out for training the other day in shorts that should not be seen outside of your bedroom. I'm sorry. I don't know what in the God's name he was thinking.
I saw that picture.
Fitzmagic has apparently lost a screw somewhere. It's two a time in Miami.
It's what happens when you lose your job to a rookie.
Yeah, just had a hip injury. Broncos Raiders. Ooh.
This is going to be one of those sneaky good divisional matchups. Denver's played pretty well the last few weeks, but the Raiders, I think they're just a little bit better of a collective unit. They have a better head coach than John Gruden. I don't know the Las Vegas Raiders.
The Seattle Seahawks and the very surprising LA Rams, who started off the season on the wrong foot and all of a sudden are looking like they can make the playoffs.
If the Seahawks don't give up 44 points again, they'll win. But no, Russell Wilson, he had a bad game last week. I think he rebounds. The Rams, they're a good team, but they always don't play well against their own division, especially Seattle. So I'm going to go the Seahawks.
This is a game that I don't think you have to even think about how this one gets picked. It is the Cincinnati Bengals and the 8-0 Pittsburgh Steelers.
The way the Steelers have played defensively is great, but offensively last week against the Cowboys, it took them a while to get going. And Joe Burrow, he's been slaying it. I'm going to go the Bengals with the upset.
Ooh, Bengals for the upset. You might have just upset the western half of Pennsylvania, and I have to travel back today.
Oh, well.
Thank you very much for that one. I'm going to go right down the middle of the line of the state and make sure I don't cross too far over to the left side. Steelers are trying to go undefeated. If they get past the Cincinnati Bengals, do the Steelers go undefeated? No.
And fun little fact, no team has gone up. Every team that started 8-0, they lost their next game. So this is probably a trap game for the Steelers, which is why I think this bodes well for the Bengals. That's why I'm choosing Cincinnati over the upset, but it's going to be a close game.
Only two teams in recent history have done that. The Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots have been able to get through week 9 and go on to 9-0. Those teams got through to an undefeated regular season. The Miami Dolphins in 72 ended up winning the Super Bowl. The New England Patriots, we're just not going to talk about that.
That's to never be spoken of.
That one gets locked away in the never to be spoken vault, especially in New England. 49ers and Saints.
The way the Saints went to Tampa Bay last week and just completely socked them in the mouth. I like the way the Saints are playing. Drew Brees looks like he's a much different quarterback than he was at the beginning of the year. I don't know the Saints.
The Sunday night game, as you mentioned earlier, Lamar Jackson, who seems to be becoming a little bit predictable lately. A lot of talk about whether or not Lamar Jackson may have just been a flash in the pan or he has something of his career, and somebody is going to quarterback this team, New England Patriots. I got to get my digs in when I can.
That's fair. I try to just get in a little jazz myself. As I said, Lamar Jackson, he's very predictable, and you know what he's going to do? He's going to run to the outside, try to run up the middle. It's like a Cam Newton-esque, only younger. This could probably be a good benefit for the Patriots. If you can trap him in the pocket and force Lamar Jackson to pass, you have a great chance to win this game because Lamar Jackson is not an accurate passer. He he struggles under pressure, especially when you're down, 10 points, especially in the playoffs, as the Titans shut him down. You find a way to shut down Lamar Jackson, the Patriots have a chance to win this game, but I have to go with the Ravens on this.
The last time a team that had Matt Nagy on the coaching staff went into a 3-game skid, the head coach passed the play calling off to a then offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy. The team rebounded to win its next 6 games. Matt Nagy is now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. The Bears are on a 3-game losing streak. Nagy says he will pass off the play calling duties to the offensive coordinator. Do the Bears beat the Minnesota Vikings on Monday night?
I don't think it'll make a difference. I don't really think it'll make much of a difference because the offense just hasn't played well since Nick Foles took over for Mitchell Trubisky, who, by the way, led the Bears to a 3-0 start before getting benched in the second half against the Falcons. So, you look at it. You're 3-0 with one guy, and then you go to the next guy who's – I think Foles is a little bit better than Trubisky, but he goes 2-4. If the Bears lose to the Vikings this week, you have to go back to Trubisky to at least salvage something and stay relevant in the NFC North, because the Patriots will easily run away with that division. But Kirk Cousins-led teams are 0-9 all-time on Monday Night Football. That's between both the Redskins and the Vikings. But the Vikings have played really well the last couple weeks. The Bears have sputtered the last 4. I didn't know the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins finally gets some win on Monday Night Football.
Monday night win. You mentioned earlier in the show about Joe Burrow and what he's doing in Cincinnati with his slinging. Baker Mayfield, obviously, in Cleveland. You have Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Kyler Murray in Arizona. Tua Tagovailoa has now taken over, so to speak, in Miami. We're looking at a lot of young gun quarterbacks in the NFL. Right now, out of that class, that's sort of like the young gun class, because they did not all come out in the same draft class. Obviously, Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson are on to their second years in the leagues.
I think Baker's on
Baker's on it. Yeah, I was going to say Baker's on about his third in the league. Obviously, the guys like Tua and Joe Burrow are the rookies. But out of that young gun class in the NFL, who really has stood up and kind of supplanted themselves as the best young gun quarterback in the league right now?
I mean, it's hard to say with Tua because he's only had one NFL start. He didn't look exceptionally great in that, so the book's still out on Tua. Joe Burrow, despite it being on a bad team in a pretty bad situation, he's playing exceptionally well. A candidate for offensive rookie of the year. He's doing fantastically, but I've read at the edge of Kyler Murray what he's done in Arizona for a guy of his height, but he can run and he's making the best of it. The Cardinals, they aren't world beaters. They aren't the greatest team in the world, but he's keeping them in games, keeping them competitive. And what he's done so far at the NFL level is amazing. So I think it's a bit of a toss-up between both Burrow and Murray. But I'm going to give it to Murray, and I put Murray ahead of Lamar Jackson because of one thing and one thing only. He's a much more accurate passer and knows when not to run, unlike Lamar Jackson, who has happy feet.
Right. We're going to take one more break as we wrap up this week's edition of Sports World Weekly. Don't forget, 2:30 right here on SFBNRI.com, RIIL boys soccer action, the rivalry game between Cranston East and Cranston West. Of course, that's where we have been all morning, broadcasting here live from the Cranston West Football Stadium. We will have that action for you 2:30 on SFBNRI.com. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. You're watching Sports World Weekly on the Sports Fan Base Network, Rhode Island. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly on the Sports Fan Base Network, Rhode Island, coming to you live, as we mentioned, from the Cranston West Football Stadium in Cranston, Rhode Island, in advance of today's Cranston West versus Cranston East RIIL boys soccer game. we're about at the end of our show today, and so we have one final thing to talk about, and that is the Miami Marlins. Now, why in the world would we want to be talking about the Miami Marlins? Well, that's because last night the Miami Marlins made history. It took her 30 years, and yes, I said her. It took her 30 years in Major League Baseball from the time she was an intern with the Chicago White Sox to eventually going on to senior level positions with the New York Yankees before now finally landing with the Miami Marlins. Derek Jeter announcing last night that he has hired Kim Ng as the new general manager of the Miami Marlins, making her the first woman to be hired as a general manager in any major men's pro sports league in the United States, frankly, in the world, and also making her the first Asian American to ever hold a senior position in baseball in the United States. That is a definite double ceiling breaker and a huge glass ceiling broken, as it proves that women do have a place in the senior divisions of Major League Baseball. Congratulations to Kim Ng. I have no doubt that she's going to be able to do some great things. There's definitely a connection here in that she spent a number of years with the New York Yankees as an assistant general manager in the Yankees organization while Derek Jeter was there as a player. In fact, she has a World Series ring from her time with the New York Yankees because she was an assistant general manager. She was the highest female executive in the Yankees organization. That now makes 2 women in senior positions in the Miami Marlins, as the Marlins chief operating officer is also a woman as well. So the Miami Marlins and Derek Jeter are breaking the glass ceiling in Major League Baseball. And I've heard a number of people talk about how this kind of goes in comparison to Jackie Robinson. My answer to the question, absolutely it does. This was a highlight moment for women. It was a highlight moment for Major League Baseball, and it's a highlight moment for the Miami Marlins. That's going to wrap it up for us for this week's edition of Sports World Weekly. Nick, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
This was definitely different and a lot of fun to not be in boxes on a computer screen doing a show together.
Hopefully next year we get to do a lot more of this.
Yeah, hopefully 2021 will put things in a different perspective. We'll be back on air 2:30 p.m. Cranston East versus Cranston West, RIIL boys soccer right here on sfbnri.com. You can tune in to sfbnri.com and just click the big red watch live button right at the top of the screen. That will be able to take you into the broadcast. And don't forget, you can check out all of the past broadcasts that we have done. All of our games are available on demand. Just click the live broadcasts button in the menu and you can be able to get on all of those. And please make sure that you also support the hashtag Let's Play RI movement. It is on the sfbnri.com website. You can check out all the information about it and all of the merchandise. Hashtag Let Them Play RI. For Matt Jolis, Nick LeBlanc, everyone here at Sports Fan Base Network Rhode Island, thank you so much for tuning in and bringing us into your homes during this trying time. Stay safe. Wash your hands, wear your mask, socially distance, listen to your health professionals, and we'll get through this all together and be back in a stadium cheering on live sports very soon. Take care. Have a great afternoon.